All right. So today is actually fairly straightforward. So we are starting the heart. Now, I know the heart is kind of one of those things that a lot of people are very excited to start. I know that that's actually one of the things that a lot of people like started liking or wanting to go to nursing about. Is just simply because of folks dealing with kind of heart issues and things like that. All right. So that means we probably at least have at least a little bit of knowledge over what the heart is, right? So we know that the heart is kind of at the center of the cardiovascular system. Okay. So let's think about what that means. This means that we have a system of vessels through which we are moving blood. We know the heart's job is going to be to pump that blood. And based off of what we learned last time, we know that blood, its job is going to be to deliver nutrients, whether that's something like oxygen or sugars and stuff like that, and distribute it to all the body, while at the same time providing a passageway to take waste products, whether it's the CO2 or metabolic waste or other cellular waste, and then move that blood along so that we can at least get that stuff to another organ so that we can get rid of it, right? Well, if we think about that, we also can already understand some of what the heart is trying to do. We, of course, know that it's going to be a pump that is going to be pushing the blood through. Well, how exactly does that work? Well, remember that blood is a liquid, okay? So because blood is a liquid, it doesn't compress very well. So if you take a whole bunch of water and put it into a water bottle or something like that, and that water bottle's filled, like you can squeeze it, but it's not really going to move, okay? It's just simply if you press on one side, the other side will have to bulge. That's because fluid can't really be compressed. So what we're going to do then is we just simply need to push a bunch of blood into the heart and then squeeze with the muscles of the heart and squeeze on that blood. And that's going to apply force to that blood and it's going to adjust, thus cause that blood to kind of eject from the heart, okay? Now, how much blood we are getting to various places is going to be a measure of what we call perfusion, okay? This is one of the kind of primary numbers that we are looking at in the cardiovascular system. How much blood can we get to the tissues, okay? If we do not have enough perfusion, that means that our cells are not going to be able to stay healthy. That means they're not going to be able to get the nutrients they need, whether that's oxygen or sugars or whatever that may be. At which point we can make the cells sick and eventually some of the cells can start to die if we have this buildup of waste products that we can't get rid of and we're not able to get oxygen in tissues and stuff to them, okay? Now, it requires the heart continually pumping. So it has to pump all the time. Our heart does not get a break. It also means that we need to have nice, healthy blood vessels to get us there, okay? All right, now, before we start talking about the heart, we do need to talk at least a little bit about the blood vessels themselves, okay? We have three major types of blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries are going to be the blood vessels that are going to carry blood away from the heart. So here, you're going to see in the systemic arteries, they're going to be drawn red. But here in the lungs, it's actually going to be the ones that are blue, okay? So arteries in the lungs are actually going to be the ones that are blue. Now, it is important that you understand that arteries are not carrying oxygenated blood, okay? Systemic arteries will carry blood that is oxygenated, but pulmonary arteries are going to contain blood that is deoxygenated, okay? So arteries just simply carry blood away from the heart. Now, because this blood is moving away from the heart, it's going to be at a much higher pressure than blood that is in the veins, blood that is being returned to the heart. That's because the heart just pushed on it, which means it's going to be moving faster and it's going to be putting more force or thus more pressure onto the blood vessels themselves. Okay, so arteries have to be able to deal with increased pressures. Now, veins, on the other hand, are going to be the blood vessels that are going to carry blood back towards the heart. Okay, so your veins are going to carry blood towards the heart. Particularly, they're going to carry it towards this right atrium right here, or the left atrium over here, depending on, once again, whether you are looking at systemic circuit or pulmonary, okay? Now, finally, this brings us to capillaries. Now, capillaries are very important because this is actually going to be the site of exchange, okay? So the site of whether it's gas exchange or sugar or whatever that may be, okay? Capillaries are actually going to be these really, really, really thin, really, really small vessels. They're barely larger than a single red blood cell. at which point the red blood cells have to stack up so that we can get oxygen into or out of them, but also so we have time to get stuff into and out of the blood plasma. So this is actually where these sites of nutrient exchange are going to occur. So they're almost always going to be drawn as these little networks. Now, why do you think a capillary might need to be a network? Okay, so all of these others, we kind of have just like big single lanes or like big single lines. Why do you think a capillary would need to be a network? What does having like a whole bunch of tubes rather than just a single large tube in this space give us? Like, why do you think we need it to be kind of broken up this way? What does that accomplish? Anybody, whether in person or on the interwebs? Anyone? Why? Why are capillaries broken up like this with a whole bunch of little small tubes? It's surface area. We get more surface area so that we have more site for exchange. Okay. So whether it's surface area in the lungs so that we can have additional oxygen coming in to the blood or getting rid of additional CO2, or in the systemic capillaries, which is going to kind of be the same thing. We need as much surface area as we can so that we can have as much exchange occurring as we possibly can. Okay. Now, the heart itself, which is going to be doing the pumping, really has three primary anatomical features. Okay. One of the biggest anatomical features of our heart. So we are humans. We have a 4-chambered heart. This is actually not true for everything on the planet. Okay. It's basically true for crocodilians, so alligators and crocodiles, birds, and then mammals. That's really about it. Okay. That's because we have really, really high metabolic requirements, which means we are going to require massive amounts of oxygen basically all the time. Okay. Because of that, our heart has kind of adopted this sort of two-sided sort of form. Okay. This two-sided form gives us a particular set of functions, namely that the heart is not really one pump. Okay. The heart is not one pump. Instead, the heart is actually two pumps. We have a right pump and a left pump. Okay. We have a pump that is going to pump deoxygenated blood into the lungs. And then we have the left side of the heart, which is going to pump oxygenated blood to the tissues. These two pumps, while they are going to operate at the same time, are actually going to work slightly differently. They have to apply very, very different amounts of force because we do not need to exert nearly as much force to get the blood to move through the lungs and back to the heart as we do in order to pump blood all the way out to your hands and your toes, while at the same time having enough force to help that blood make its way back to the heart. Okay. The left side of the heart is going to have to pump much, 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 much harder than will the right. Okay. But we still have this kind of two-sided pump. We have the right-sided pump and we have the left-sided pump. Okay. Now, one of the other anatomical features here is that we also have the great vessels, which are going to be the blood vessels through which the blood is moving. These are going to transport blood to and from the chambers of the heart. Okay. So we have left and right sides, we have the 4 chambers, and then we have our great vessels. Okay. We also have the valves. Okay. Those are going to be the primary kind of anatomical features of the heart. So we have the right and left sides, we have the great vessels, and then we're going to have the valves, which separate the heart into these 4 major chambers. Okay. Now, the great vessels, like I said, are going to be the ones that are going to carry blood to and from the heart. Now, above the heart, so superior to the heart, we have the superior vena cava, and we have the aorta, and then we have the pulmonary trunk, okay, and the pulmonary arteries. Okay, so the pulmonary trunk is this kind of trunk of the tree. When it branches, it will branch into the pulmonary arteries. Okay, then we also have the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins are going to return blood to the left side of the heart. So now that blood is oxygenated, then it will go down here to the bottom of the heart and get pumped out. Now, inferior to the heart, you can see two structures. You can see the aorta, and then we have the inferior vena cava. Now, what you can't see very well here is that this aorta is actually continuous with the aorta up here. So the aorta goes up and then curves into what we call the aortic arch, and then it will become the descending aorta as it moves down. Okay, so the blood will go up this way, and then we'll continue moving down this way. I don't know why they didn't draw a down arrow down here, so that you can see that this blood is moving inferiorly. Okay, now blood that needs to go up to, say, our head or up to our upper limbs and things like that is actually going to leave the aorta right here in the aortic arch. We have three major arteries branching off the aorta up here, or branching off the aortic arch. So these are going to be the brachiocephalic, cephalic, and subclavian arteries. These are basically going to carry blood where their name says they're going, and we'll talk about those next time when we talk about blood vessels, or at least maybe a little bit. Now, getting blood to the heart, we have the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. These are going to drain into this first chamber right here. This is the right atrium. So this is where blood is going to enter the heart for the first time in a given kind of cardiac cycle. Okay. So the blood entering right here is going to be deoxygenated. That's to say there's very little oxygen in it. Okay. Or at least less than what we want it to have. Okay. All right. Then, like I said, we have the valves of the heart. Now we have two what we call atrioventricular valves, and we have two valves at the openings to the great vessels. So our atrioventricular valves are going to separate the heart into atria and ventricles. So the atriums are going to be these upper chambers. So we have right and left atriums, and we have right and left ventricles. Okay. The ventricles are going to contract much, much, much more strongly than the atria. The atria are essentially just a weak kind of what they call a primer pump. Okay. So it's basically just like a little bulb that is going to squeeze and push a little bit of extra fluid down here into the ventricles. Okay. As those ventricles fill, they're going to stretch. And then when it is time for the ventricles to contract, they will squeeze and they will press that blood out through these great vessels, whether it's the pulmonary trunk or through the aorta, depending on which side you're coming from. Okay. Now, these valves are actually here to prevent backflow of the blood. This is basically to make sure that the blood is really only having to be pumped once. Okay. We don't want to have to pump the same blood twice. We also don't want to have to pump against ourselves. We want this to stay a unidirectional flow. Okay. So we only want the blood moving in one direction at any given time. These valves are going to help do that. Now, you will notice that the atrioventricular valves are going to be connected to some little bits of muscle down here by these little strands of connective tissue. These little strands of connective tissue we're going to call chordae tendineae. Okay. These chordae tendineae are going to connect to these little fingers of, or what we call papillary muscles. So these little finger-like extensions of muscle, these papillary muscles. Now, these cords and these fingers of muscle are actually here to keep the valves from being pushed too far into the atria. Okay. So if these cords pop, that means the valve can actually push itself up into the atria, at which point blood can then flow back into the atria, which is against the flow where we want the blood moving, which means we're now getting very, very, very inefficient with our blood flow, which means blood is not going to tissues. Okay. Always keep that in the back of your mind. We need blood getting to tissues. We need oxygenated blood getting to tissues. If the heart is not contracting efficiently and is not pumping efficiently, that means we are not getting oxygen and nutrients to the tissues, which means the tissues can die. Okay. So we are always trying to do that. So if we have the heart having to pump backwards and fighting against itself, what's that going to mean? Well, that's going to mean that we're having less blood getting to tissues, and some of those tissues could die. One of those tissues that could die is actually going to be the muscle that is in the heart itself. Okay, so if we're not pumping enough blood out of the heart, we can actually start to starve the heart itself of blood, causing all kinds of fun problems. Okay. Now, as you can see, because I've talked about this kind of right side and left side of the heart, the differences between these two circulations is actually going to be fairly important. We have two primary kind of directions the blood's going to go. We're going to push blood into what we call the pulmonary circulation. So pulmonary meaning lungs, and we have the systemic circulation. So that's pushing blood into the systems. Okay. So right heart pushes it to the lungs, comes back to the left heart, which then goes out to the tissues, and then it gets pushed back into the right heart and does this kind of over again. Now, in pulmonary circulation, what are we doing? We're pumping into the lungs. Why are we pumping into the lungs? Like, what's the point of pumping blood into the lungs? Anybody? I will wait here until the end of time. Internet people or in-person people? Correct. We are trying to get oxygen into the blood. Okay. So we are trying to take the blood from being deoxygenated. We're trying to get some oxygen into it. Okay. So we first have to take the blood in that's coming from the tissues and then get it to the oxygen, which means we have to get it to the lungs. Okay. We get into the lungs, we oxygenate that blood, then we return it to the heart. So now we can get it out to the tissues. And we're just going to do this over and over and over again. But by having the heart be just a single pump, that means we can locate all of those vessels kind of just in one single place. There are animals like, say, octopi and stuff like that, which will have multiple hearts so that they can do kind of multiple portions of this same idea. Okay. But us having this four-chambered heart kind of centrally located allows us to do it all at once and utilize the same bits of muscle to do each one. Now, if we are not getting enough blood, one of the things that this can cause is swelling or edema. Okay. Now, if we have swelling and edema in the body's systems, this is actually because the right ventricle is not able to get enough blood into the lungs. Okay. So we're not actually getting enough blood into the right side of the heart, which means we're leaving a whole bunch of blood out into the system. Okay. Or like just out in the systems. We're not getting enough blood into the right side of the heart, which means we're going to have swelling in the tissues and stuff of the body. This is especially going to happen in places like the hands and feet. Okay. Now, instead, if we have, say, a messed up left side of the heart, this is going to cause pooling behind that. So in the case of a messed up left side of the heart, this means we're going to have pooling of fluid in the lungs, which is really bad. Okay. Swelling and fluid accumulation in lungs can lead to difficulty breathing, impaired gas exchange. You can actually start to cough up blood because some of that blood actually is going to start pushing its way through some of those capillaries because there's just no room for it to go anywhere. So some of those capillaries can burst, starting to push up blood into your lungs, which means you can start to cough it up. So that can actually lead to death if it's not taken care of really quickly. So all of that is very important. All right. Now getting to the lung itself, the heart itself, location of the heart is fairly important. If we look right here, we can see that the heart is going to be found deep to the sternum. Okay, but it is going to be found slightly more on the left-hand side. Left-hand side of the body here. It's going to rest on what is actually the right ventricle. So the heart's going to be kind of slanted down a little bit, and it's going to be resting on the right ventricle. Now, from the front side, you mostly see the right side of the heart. From the back side, so a posterior view, you'll mostly be seeing the left side of the heart. Okay, so it's slightly twisted. And it's going to be sitting on the base, which, like I said, is going to be formed from our right ventricle. Then it has this kind of end over here, which is going to be called the apex. Now, the heart is roughly the size of your closed fist, which is to say it's not very large. Okay, so it's fairly small. And it's just going to be kind of sitting just like this, kind of in your thoracic cavity. Now, that base is sitting right here against your diaphragm. Now, while the heart is moving and beating and stuff like that, it is actually going to be surrounded and protected by a series of fibrous membranes, or a single fibrous membrane right here, which is going to help be one of the parts of what we call the pericardial sac. This is basically just to make sure that the heart does not overfill with blood, but also so that it's protected from, say, the lungs and stuff like that as they are trying to inflate. So the heart has its own little space kind of right here in this little cavity. Okay. Now, the cavity in which it's going to find itself is also going to be called the mediastinum, which is this kind of central cavity inside the thoracic cavity. Now, you can also see that it's going to be, the base of the heart is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rib pairs down. Okay. Now, the rib pairs are actually going to be fairly important here and kind of their position relative to the sternum here, in part because if we listen in between particular rib pairs, we can actually listen to particular valves based off of where we are placing our stethoscopes. So that's what that heart auscultation virtual lab is about. And we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. All right. Now, if we kind of take a cross section here, we can see that the heart is kind of centrally located between our lungs. So the lungs do kind of intrude on its space a little bit. We have to have notches cut out of our lungs to make room for the heart itself. And then we have our esophagus going down to our stomach and our great vessels back here. So you can see that things are pretty tight. Now, like I said, the heart does have some protective coverings. We have this fibrous layer out here, which can be called the fibrous pericardium. Now, just deep to that, actually touching the fibrous pericardium, is going to be our parietal layer of our serous pericardium. So we're going to have a parietal layer of our pericardial sac right here, and then we're going to have the visceral layer of that pericardial sac actually touching the surface of the heart. So touching the surface of the heart is going to be the visceral layer, or the epicardium, and then we're going to have a space. Okay, so this little bit of space right here, this is basically just room for the heart to expand. After the heart has contracted and the ventricles have gotten really small, you'll actually see more of this space available. And then we have, on the other side of that space, we have the parietal layer of our serous pericardium, and then finally we have the fibrous pericardium outside that. So fibrous meaning it is tough. This is basically this nice static space, once again, to help make sure the heart has enough room in which to beat. Okay. Now, this view, we can also see kind of our right and left atria right here, right and left ventricles. We can see our right and left atrioventricular valves, the chordae tendineae. We can see our papillary muscles and stuff like that. We also see this big band of muscle that separates or forms the septum between our right and left ventricles. We can also see the extra muscle over here making up the left side of the heart. That's because it is pushing out towards the body. Now, importantly here, if we have an issue with our pericardial sac, this can cause problems. So typically this is caused by infections and stuff like that. If we get too much fluid in here in these spaces, particularly the pericardial cavity, essentially that's the space between your fibrous pericardium and that serous pericardial layer. That can fill with fluid, at which point we run out of room. So the heart is not going to be able to beat correctly because there's a bunch of fluid getting in the way. The heart can't beat correctly, which is going to lead to some weird kind of heart sounds. Okay. Because the heart is unable to contract. This can actually cause lots of problems. However, you can actually hear this process as that it's starting to happen. Okay. So if these pericardial layers start to touch, which they ordinarily don't, you can actually hear the friction of them touching. This is going to sound kind of like a crackle when you're listening to the beating of the heart. Now, this is different than the crackling sound that you hear when someone has like pneumonia or something like that, at which point you would hear the crackles on their exhalations. It would actually be a crackle sound that you'd hear during heart beating or when the heart is beating. All right, so now we can actually look at some of the structures of the heart. Now, once again, we have our great vessels up here. So superior, inferior vena cava. We have the aorta. We have the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins. Now we can also see these kind of big flaps of tissue here. These things that kind of look almost like ears. These are going to be the auricles. We have a right and a left. These are basically going to sit on top of the right and left atria. Now underneath those auricles, you're going to see a little groove. Okay, this little groove underneath those auricles is actually going to be, it's called the coronary sulcus. Okay, so just like in the brain, the grooves were called a sulcus. This sulcus is going to contain arteries and veins. Okay, so we have the coronary artery here, and we have the coronary vein here. Okay, at least on the right hand side. Now, these blood vessels, what do you think these blood vessels are doing? So these are not the great vessels here, which are moving blood into and out of the heart. So what do we think these blood vessels are doing? What tissues are we trying to oxygenate with our arteries here? Anybody? We're trying to get blood to the heart muscle itself. Okay. That is what we are trying to do. We're trying to get blood to the heart itself. When someone has a heart attack, what they've done is they've had an issue with getting blood through one of these arteries. Typically, it's this one. Okay. And because blood is not moving through these arteries very well, that means we're not getting enough blood to the actual muscle of the heart, which means the heart cannot beat correctly. When that happens, these muscle cells are going to start to die because they're not getting enough oxygen, and where they're constantly getting this signal contract. So some of these heart muscle cells can die, at which point you have a heart attack. Okay. That is really, really bad. And one of the things that they would do then, or later on, like so say when you're at a hospital, hopefully still alive, to see what's happened, they'll actually find little bits and pieces of heart muscle kind of in your blood, or particularly they'll find chemicals that you would find because of the breakdown of the cardiac muscle tissue in your blood. And that says, oh, okay, this person has had a heart attack because we're finding things like creatine kinase in the blood. Okay. Which it should not be there. And it's all because of the breakdown of this cardiac muscle here. Okay. All because we didn't get enough oxygen to it. So this one, because we're on the right-hand side here, this is our right coronary artery. We have another coronary artery over here. Now, this blood vessel, as it wraps around this left-hand side, it is wrapping around, moving around to the outside. So we're going to call this the circumflex artery on the left-hand side. We're also going to see this big blood vessel right here separating the right and left ventricles. Because it is separating these right and left ventricles, it is the anterior, because we're on the front, interventricular artery. Okay. Anterior because it's on the front, interventricular because it's between the ventricles on the artery. Now, importantly, this is going down or leading to the apex of the heart. So it's taking blood all the way down here to the apex of the heart and these cells down here. Okay. Now we're going to see some of the same stuff from the back, including this big structure right here in this vein. So this is what's called the coronary sinus. This is basically where blood that has been drained from the heart muscle itself, so deoxygenated blood that is deoxygenated blood from the heart tissues, will get sent here to our coronary sinus, where it then will drain into our right atrium. Okay, so that's going to make it a fairly important structure. Okay. So this is all kind of exterior stuff. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the interior side. Now, importantly here, the walls of the heart are going to look different depending on which side we look at. And once again, this is all because of what we need the sides of the heart to do. Remember, the right side of the heart is what's pushing blood to the lungs. The left side of the heart is what's pushing it to the rest of the body. So the left side of the heart is going to have much, much, much thicker walls. So it can generate far, far, far more force because it's having to push more blood, or it's having to push blood a much, much, much for longer distance than just simply the right side does. Now, the heart wall itself is composed of three main tissue layers. Okay, we have the epicardium here. Then we're going to have the myocardium, which is actually going to be the actual myocardial muscle itself. Okay, all going to be composed of cardiac muscle. Now, importantly here, the vast majority of the tissue in the heart is going to be this cardiac muscle, including the signal conduction pathways that we're going to be looking at. Some nerves do innervate the heart, but the actual signal transduction pathways in the heart itself are still composed of cardiac muscle. Now, this leads to some questions like, okay, what does cardiac muscle actually look like? What does it do? Remember that cardiac muscle is branched here, where one cell can talk to multiple cells and then they can network with one another. This basically allows the signals as well as nutrients to pass from one cell to the next. So it's actually fairly easy for if we get started contraction in one cell, that it will talk not just to one cell on the other side, but to multiple cells on the other side, so that we can make sure that all of the cells in the heart are kind of doing what they need to do in the proper order and orientation of things. However, they are striated muscle, which means they're going to contract quite strongly. This is different from smooth muscle, which doesn't contract nearly as hard as something like skeletal muscle or cardiac muscle. Now, on the innermost layer, we're going to have our endocardium. This is going to be composed of a single layer of simple squamous epithelium, okay, what we would call the endothelium, but then it's going to have our areolar connective tissue connecting that to the myocardium. We're going to see something similar in the epicardium, but instead, we're also going to have a layer of adipose connective tissue mixed in with our areolar connective tissue. So we're going to have a little bit of fat on the outside. We don't have any fat on the inside. That's basically just there as kind of cushioning. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the chambers of the heart now. So now we're looking at the inside of the heart. So here we have the right atrium, left atrium. So right side, right atrium, left atrium. These are going to open into the right and left ventricles. Notice the differences in the size of the walls. Okay. Now, separating our atriums from our ventricles, remember we have our atrioventricular valves. Once again, conveniently named, considering they separate the atriums and the ventricles. Okay. Now, the right side, this is our right atrioventricular valve. Our left side is our left atrioventricular valve, or our bicuspid and tricuspid valves. So named because of the numbers of bundles and the numbers of cusps of this particular valves. Okay. I would prefer you to just simply call them right atrioventricular or left atrioventricular valves. That's perfectly fine with me. That's what your book calls them. Okay. Now, if we look in the right atrium here, though, we see a large opening for blood coming from the inferior vena cava and another large opening for blood from the superior vena cava. Now, the superior vena cava is basically draining blood from the head and upper arm. So basically everything that's above the heart. The inferior vena cava is essentially going to be draining blood from, or returning blood from basically everything that's below the heart to the heart. Now, we can also see a couple of other structures here, namely our fossa ovalis. Our fossa ovalis is going to be important because this is actually one of the places where we could shunt blood back and forth during a fetal heartbeat. Okay, so during the growing of a fetus, there's a pathway between the right and left atriums. This is because the infant or the fetus is actually not doing its own breathing, which means we're not actually trying to get, or we're not really going to have much deoxygenated blood there. We're relying on the mother to get oxygen to the infant that way. Okay, so the blood is actually going to get kind of shunted through to the left atrium over here. Now, if this does not close, this is going to lead to a kind of a heart murmur for the child. And over time, it will typically close on its own. But if not, that can lead to some problems because, once again, blood flow will not be doing what it's supposed to be doing. And we know that that decreases overall cardiac output, which decreases the amount of oxygen going to our tissues, which increases the chance of tissue death in places. Okay. Now, as the blood moves down here, we also have the opening for our coronary sinus. Right here, this is basically blood from your coronary vessels, so your heart vessels, getting returned to the right atrium so that that blood can get pumped out yet again. Okay. Now, we can also see all of these little muscles out here on the side. We're going to call these the trabeculae carnae. So remember, trabeculae is bridge. Trabeculae carnae is basically just these little bridges of muscle tissue here, giving the inside of the heart this kind of fun appearance. These structures down here, these little fingers of muscle, we're going to call these the papillary muscles. Once again, these are here to hold onto these cords to make sure that these valves do not open into the atrium, so that they basically don't get, because the ventricles of the heart are contracting so hard, so fast, it is possible that they can actually overpower these valves and actually push them backwards into the atrium, which is actually not what we want. Okay, so these cords are actually there to help prevent that process from happening, because if that does happen, those valves start to open backwards. Once again, the heart is going to start fighting itself again, and that can cause major issues. Okay. No, so blood pumps in through here, passes through the right atrioventricular valve into the right ventricle, and then out through a valve right here, leading into the pulmonary trunk, and then eventually the pulmonary arteries. This is our pulmonary semilunar valve. So semilunar because it looks like these little half moons here. Okay, these, just the blood is going to get pushed with such force that it's going to force these valves to open. So it's going to push the blood straight through these, and there's going to be enough pressure in the blood as it is moving through the pulmonary arteries, the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary arteries, and through the aorta, that's what's actually going to cause these valves to close. Now, when they close, they're going to have this little kind of cup shape, which is going to prevent that blood from being able to flow back in. Okay. Or from even pooling as it's trying to go back in. But it basically will keep the blood from being able to work its way back in. We're going to see the same thing on the other side. So here we have our pulmonary veins returning blood to the left atrium. Blood passes down through the left atrioventricular valve into the left ventricle, where it gets pushed with a massive amount of force up through our atrial or aortic semilunar valve, and then out through the aorta. Okay. Your coronary arteries are actually going to branch right here off of the aorta before you can actually see what's down here. So we're actually going to have some branching basically right above the heart where these blood vessels can branch back out and take blood to the heart muscle itself. Okay. But then that blood gets pushed up through here, and some of that blood will go through our BCS. So our 3 branches off of our aorta before it enters the descending aorta and goes out to the rest of the body's tissues. So the upper body stuff is all going to come from these 3 branches right here. So B, C, and S off of the aorta. Now, because this is pushed with enough force that we can actually get blood to go all the way down to the tips of your fingers and to the tips of your toes, the aorta is incredibly elastic. Okay, it's going to be composed of lots and lots of elastic tissue in addition to the muscles that you'd find in there because it's an artery. This is going to allow it to have a whole bunch of stretch. However, if you've ever heard of something like atherosclerosis, this is basically a hardening of the arteries. This is caused by a buildup of, it starts typically with cholesterol in these areas where you kind of get this buildup of tissue on the inside of the blood vessels. So you have less movement and less ability of those blood vessels to move and open as they're getting hit with these pulses of blood, at which point this is also going to harden them so they're not able to move as much, at which point they can actually break under certain stress. So you would actually have a splitting of the wall of the blood vessel itself, which can cause all kinds of fun problems. So that is something that we do want to kind of watch out for. Here we have another view of the heart valves. If you took a perfect section, you'd actually be able to look right down at the heart valves like this, where we see our left atrioventricular valve, right atrioventricular valve. Notice that we have 2 spots. So our left side is the bicuspid, our right side would be the tricuspid. And then we have the aortic semimillimeter valve here and the pulmonary semimillimeter valve here. To get this slice, you'd have to cut it quite literally perfectly, but it'd be like right here. But once again, the whole idea is that we are preventing backflow. All right, so hold on, sure. Now, like I said, the heart is going to be composed of cardiac muscle. However, the cardiac muscle here in the heart is actually going to be composed in a very particular arrangement. So as you can see, we get this kind of spiraling and twisting to these major bands of the cardiac muscle fibers. So we see this kind of spiral arrangement. This is basically going to make sure that when the muscles contract, that we are able to both shorten the heart and narrow the heart. So the atria in particular are going to be involved in kind of narrowing the heart. So they squeeze and push some blood down into the ventricles. And the ventricles, when they contract, they will also narrow, but they're primarily going to be trying to shorten. So instead of it being kind of the shape of a fist, it would basically become, a much smaller fist. So instead of your fist being shaped kind of sideways, where it would be kind of shortened. Okay, so from top to bottom, it'll kind of squeeze in this way and thus ejecting that blood and pushing it out to the tissues with a bunch of force. Okay, this is also going to be kind of similar to how the transduction pathways of the signals themselves are going to work, which we'll talk about next time. Okay, now the next few pictures are basically just going to be looking at some of the blood vessels. So here we have, because they are in red, these are going to be the coronary arteries. So red is showing oxygenated blood. So this is basically oxygenated blood coming off of our ascending aorta in two sides. We have the left coronary artery going to the left side of the heart, the right coronary artery going to the right side of the heart in that coronary sulcus. And then we can see some branches down here, okay, where we have the marginal artery, which is going to be kind of forming down here at the base of the heart. So that's forming the margin of the heart. And then on the left-hand side, we have the left coronary artery. We have the circumflex artery, which is the one that's going to wrap around. And then we have the anterior interventricular artery, which is going to separate the right and left ventricles. Now, we're going to see a similar story with the veins, where we have the great cardiac vein, which is going to be carrying venous return from the apex of the heart back towards the coronary sinus, which, remember, is kind of on the posterior side of the heart. And then we have the small cardiac vein, which is once again down here near that marginal artery. Middle cardiac vein, basically from the middle, at which point all of these are returning their blood to the coronary sinus. If you've ever heard of someone having angina is actually going to be the heart pain that is caused during strenuous activity. This is usually going to be because of a lack of blood to the heart itself. So they'll start to experience this angina because we're not getting enough blood to the heart. So they will start to experience some of that heart pain. They'll also usually get a little bit of referred pain up into the left-hand side of the chest, the left arm, and then sometimes even the jaw. Okay. The fancy word for a heart attack is a myocardial infarct. This basically happens when that coronary artery becomes occluded, so we're not getting oxygen to the myocardium, which remember is the muscle, which we can eventually lead to possible tissue death, which is real bad. We typically get this with pain starting down the left arm, at least in males. All right, I'm trying to think. There's much anatomy. Well, I think that's all stuff we're talking about next time. Yeah. All right. So signal conduction, all that kind of stuff is what we will talk about next time. So this time it's basically just all about the anatomy. So learn the blood vessels, let the great vessels and the cardiac vessels or coronary vessels. And then also make sure that we are learning all of the structures of the heart, including our valves, our chambers, our fossae, all of these fun structures, basically the entire list, which is in the outline for the chapter. Let's locate all of those. I'll give y'all, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes to work on that. There's also a great anatomy physiology revealed assignment to work through as well if you want to do that, where you can actually see kind of a human heart dissection going through there. And then we will look at one of the pig hearts.